Everybody, it's me, Peter. I am happy you're here, and this is Stacks and Facts, and I'm doing a live stream because why not? If you are here, go ahead and sound off in the chat, which is over there, I think, or maybe down there. I don't actually watch that many live streams, so I don't know where the chat appears when you're just a viewer. But let me know you're here. Yeah, I'm happy to have you. So today I kind of wanted to do a live stream just to check in with everybody, see how you all are doing. I figured maybe we could talk a bit about libraries in the time of COVID. What else? Various updates about work precarity, which happens to be the situation I am in, and how I'm dealing with that. Because, oh boy, let me tell you, it's not super fun. Let's see. So we've got some folks in the chat. We've got Althena, and we've got Candace, and we've got Tyler. Hello, all three of you. Happy to have you here. Let's see. Anything that you guys want to talk about today? Let me know in the chat over there. I think. Pretty sure it's over there. Otherwise, I guess I'll just give you a rundown of where I'm at. So, as you probably have heard, there has been a global pandemic, which is a little redundant, but it's fine. There's been a pandemic around the world. COVID-19 is just a pain in the butt, and that's been going on for the past, since the start of the year, since technically before the start of the year. And then it really got serious in North America, or people started taking it seriously in North America come March. I will caveat everything going forward with a reminder that I am speaking from the Canadian context. Not that I'm Canadian, I just happen to be an American living in Canada. And let me tell you, the way that the US and Canada are handling this is very different. So I might say something you might be like, Peter, that's bad advice. I won't hopefully be giving advice, but if it doesn't sound like it applies to you, that's why. Obviously, rely on the advice of your own health authority rather than me. Yeah, so let's see. Tyler says that they are doing great. Just had a job interview for a small rural library, and you hear back on Friday. That is so exciting. I hope you get the job. I know it's been a bit of a mess in terms of jobs, which we will talk about in a little bit. But I'm glad to hear that you got an interview. I've got some news on that end as well. And then Candace says, I had 2 library interviews today. Still applying for more jobs. Relatable. I was working as a LibTech before they started, before the stay-at-home orders took effect. There was a broad Ontario Public Colleges layoff, so a lot of us are looking for work. Yeah, so I can relate. So where I'm at is our library closed to the public right around March 17th or 18th, and we stayed around for a while, and this might be old news to you. I can't remember if I talked about this in my last stream, but we stayed around for a little while. The doors were shut to the public, and all of our branches except for our central branch was closed just totally. But our central branch is very large, and so they still had folks coming in, doing about 50% in and 50% out. Our shifts, so I'm an auxiliary, so my shifts are already a little pell-mell, as it were. But the shifts that we had scheduled out 6 weeks were honored, so we were still coming in. And then our city recruited a bunch of folks to work in the COVID emergency hotline phone center. That's what it's called. So I did that about once a week every now and then. But pretty quickly, the way it worked is we switched just straight to 100% work from home. And that's happened right around the same time that the city announced they were laying off 75% of the workforce. So early April, I think. Time has no meaning to me, but I think it was early April, I got notice that I was being laid off. Didn't surprise me because by that point, almost all of the other library systems in Metro Vancouver, which is where I live, had already laid their people off. But shout out to my union, CUPE, which is the Canadian Union of Public Employees. Our local branch here for the city that I work at got the city to provide us with a wage protection period of 6 weeks. So for 6 weeks, I was still paid, even though I was not working, which then let me delay having to find a new job for a while. And that wage protection period ended on May 26th. Yeah. So during that wage protection period, I was still going in because the thing was, you don't have to go to work, but if you can do something else, that would be great. So I was doing that phone center, that call center, once a week through the end of that, which was really fun. It was like, let me tell you, y'all, it was a lot easier to cope with social isolation when I got to still talk to people on the phone and still have kind of that regular schedule to rely on where I would go somewhere. Why is my internet so bad? Hopefully that cleared up. Sorry, I just noticed that I got the spinning circle, so we'll see. If you miss anything, let me know and I'll go back and repeat. So wage protection period ended on May 26th, and then as of May 26th, I was officially unemployed. When we all got notices of layoffs, our employer, our bosses, were very explicit in that, to them, their plan was that all layoffs would be temporary and everyone would be hired back. And in fact, before the wage protection period ended, all full-time and part-time librarians in my system were recalled and reemployed. As an auxiliary, I was not. And you can imagine I felt some way about that. That was very frustrating. Hello, Courage and Love. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. If you have a second, update us on how your life is going in the chat. If you choose, you don't have to. No obligation. So yeah, after I was laid off, it gave me a lot of time to myself to think about like what my employment status looks like and what it means to be an auxiliary librarian, what it means to be a librarian in these times. And like legit, I got frustrated. And on, I think, June 6th or June 7th, I got a phone call right around the same time that I started applying for jobs. I got a phone call from one of the managers at my library saying, "Hey, Peter, just want to let you know that we are calling back all of the auxiliary librarians who have seniority, and I just wanted to offer you your job back." And hilariously, the day before, one of my colleagues had emailed me just personally, and they were like, "Hey, Peter, I just want to check in on you, see how you're doing. I'm working with the union, and like we are trying to figure out what we can do to get the auxiliaries coming back." And I straight up said to her, and these are my feelings, I still feel this. I told her, "That's great. I would love to jump on a call with the union. Here's my thoughts." Basically, it's never been more clear to me that as an auxiliary librarian, I'm very much a second-class employee, which is boggling to me because up until COVID-19 happened, I was working as much or more almost every single week than part-time librarians. The only difference was that I wasn't eligible for benefits or time off or anything like that. And like having had enough time to think about that has become very frustrating to me. So the day after I got that email, when I got the call from my boss, I was like, "Hey, great, this is great news. Thanks for letting me know. I am going to be honest with you." And I told her straight up, like, "I really appreciate the offer to come back, but I've had this time to think, and I'm very much of two minds about what it means to be a part of a system, and not like my specific library system, but the system at large of librarianship, where it relies so heavily on having two separate categories of employees, even though you might have them work the same, do the same amount of work, do the same kind of work, but compensate them differently, and not treat them equally, not provide them the same protections. And so I can't give you an answer right now whether or not I want to come back. I will get back to you." And she's like, "No, I totally understand. Thanks for letting me know." And so I told her, I will get back to you, but I'm not doing that right now. I need to talk to my partner about it, and we got to figure things out. And so I talked to my partner about it, because she was also looking for a job at the time, and she still is, although she's had a few really good interviews. So I'm very hopeful for her that she should be employed soon. And ultimately, the way that it panned out is I got onto the call with the union, and I talked with a bunch of other auxiliary librarians from our system. And yeah, the frustration's real. And I was thinking maybe, saying it out loud will make me feel better about it. And it has. Like, y'all, let me tell you, don't sit on your feelings. Get them out there, put them out there for others to help you with. But talking to folks and thinking about it, like, this frustration with the system hasn't gone away. And so at present, I find myself kind of in a situation where I am applying for jobs that aren't in libraries, because there are no library job postings locally right now, of course. And before all of this happened, like, I hadn't been applying for jobs before COVID-19, even though I was an auxiliary, because I was like, well, as an auxiliary, I'm getting 30 hours a week and like a little bit percentage bump in pay in lieu of benefits and all of these things. And you know what? That's okay, because at some point my system is probably gonna like hire me as a part-time librarian or a full-time librarian or something like that, and everything will be hunky-dory. But man, the frustration, so yeah, I've been applying for jobs outside of library, and I have had a couple of interviews, and I have another one coming up. So I guess we'll see. Now I'm gonna look at the chat and see what y'all have to say about all that. Candace says, oof, I feel that. It's hard. It is hard. Like, the limits of being outside the union, but you still need to make a living. Courage is in the same place as me. Althena, sorry, I just got a notice saying that my streaming is not great. Althena says, how what I'm doing? I had some seed sprout. Ooh, doing some gardening. Excellent. Don't have bachelor's yet. Gotta figure out. So you're I just want to thank you for talking about the auxiliary casual phenomenon as a whole, rather than advocating for your own spot in the union. The system sort of encourages people to be less collaborative and like indirectly compete with their coworkers. Yes, and I think that's one of the big things that I'm having going on right now is like, I can stay a librarian and I can stay in the system and I can continue doing what I'm doing, but as long as I do that, I continue to contribute to a system that does that has that as its way of operating. Before COVID-19 had happened, there had been talks at my system about stopping relying so heavily on auxiliaries. And it might be worth mentioning, I've heard that here in British Columbia, there's a real problem, an over-reliance on auxiliary labor. So I don't know if it's better in other places, but here, like, my employer, like, not just the library, but the city itself, I think 58 or 59% of the workforce is auxiliary, which is a problem in itself. And, if I'm part of that system, am I contributing to it? Those are the things that I worry about. So we'll see how that goes. I'm sorry my video is so choppy, y'all. I think I might be streaming with the person upstairs. If that is so, hopefully you're going to get caught up. Yeah, so that's what's been going on in my life. I applied for a job with the Library of Congress. I applied for 2 jobs with the Library of Congress. One of them I have not gotten, but since I've got you here, let's just see what the status of the other one is. USA jobs. And while I do that, so I see in the chat that a lot of you are not librarians yet, or you work in libraries, but not as librarians. What brings you here? I'm always curious to see, like, what motivates folks to come to my channel, and I rarely ever get to ask them directly, so let me know while I get logged in. Probably I have not been offered a job at the Library of Congress, but it never hurts to check. Okay, so right now for the second job that I applied for with them, We are waiting to hear back from the selecting official. That's fine. Cool. So we will continue to wait. All right. Excellent to hear, Candace. I'm guessing probably what it's doing is it's just like pausing the stream and then continuing where it picked up. I don't know. Yeah, so the job hunt is real. I am pretty excited about a job that I have applied for here in Vancouver. Again, not a library job, which is kind of a bummer. But other than that, like looking at I've done some digging on the company and they seem like they have a really great culture. They have very good demographics, as it were, considering the sector that they are in. And I will not go into too many details because privacy. But yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I had one interview with them this past Thursday, and then I have another interview with them next Friday. And then after that, we will see where we go. Yeah, it would be really nice to have a job. Like, I don't mind telling you, I'm getting real stir crazy, as it were. Fortunately, things here in British Columbia are doing much, much better than they are in most places in North America. Like, far and away, much better. I think we've had just a handful of cases each day, like less than 20 each day, some days less than 10 over the past like month, which is stellar. And then today the province just announced phase 3 of reopening, so which is the second to the last phase of reopening. The last phase isn't going to come until there's a community immunity or a vaccine, so probably not for like another 6 months to a year at least, but we'll see. But kind of as a way to celebrate that, my partner and I are going camping, and we're going to go camping at a respectful distance with a bunch of our friends, which should be really nice. Again, gotta get out of the house. I'm getting a little stir crazy, so there's that. Okay, so I'm going to check in with the chat. Let's see where we're at. Courage and love. I also love libraries. You're in the right place. Emily T says, hey, I'm entering library school this fall. What tips do you have for grad school and such? You know, I made a video about this, and you may have already watched it. But in case you haven't, watch it. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, you should watch it. But I would say the biggest tip I have, and like people don't seem to take me seriously when I say this, but I kid you not, the best thing you can do in grad school is sleep. Make sure that you are prioritizing sleep. Sleep whenever you can. Make sure, like, do whatever you got to do to get that 7 hours or 7.5 hours of sleep. If that means like not doing the very absolute best on an assignment, fine. If it means not studying sometimes, fine. Ultimately, what's going to happen when you really emphasize and prioritize sleep is your performance at everything that you do just gets better. And so it takes you less effort to do really good things. Whereas if you keep yourself in a perpetually sleep deprived state, your ability to do stuff just drops. And that gets reflected in the quality of work that you do. And in turn, you end up spending more time doing things than you necessarily have to if you were in good condition. And of course, there's other things, but that's my biggest piece of advice. But go check out the other video for more stuff, or email me. People always email me, so go for it. With like a specific question, like, oh, I want to do this, that, or the other. Although worth mentioning, I actually was just in a online conference, or like an online, like, what's it called? Like a Zoom meeting, basically. But it was simulating a what do you call it? A conference panel, an online panel. That's the word. For the Provincial Library Association here, BCLA, and we were talking about leadership and what getting involved in student government can do for you when you are a library student. And like, you know, bottom line up front, I was part of the grad student society when I was doing my master's, and it was such a great experience. The reason that I really got a lot from that is it gave me a chance to do hands-on work with folks that aren't librarians. It gave me exposure to folks who were learning about things that I wasn't learning about. And that exposure to differing ideas is almost always a beneficial thing. Like hanging out with actual dyed-in-the-wool scientists was just one of the coolest things in the world. So if you have a chance, get involved with your student government. Turns out it's possible, highly likely in fact, that your student government or your student organization is actually a nonprofit, and they might even need some information work done for them. So for me, that ended up being designing a database to track people and attendance and certifications and stuff like that. And I did a bit of advising on records management stuff. So yeah, options. What else do we got going on? Tyler just earned their MSLS this past May. Congratulations, Tyler. Everybody give a round of applause for Tyler. You've been following my channel around the time I started library school. Okay, so we've been at this for about the same amount of time. I'm into it. Candace says that I find that technicians and librarians work different capacities, but the project work is similar enough, and we rely on librarians as specialists. That's really cool. The system that I work at right now actually doesn't have library technicians. We have 3 classifications. There are librarians, there are clerks, and there are pages. Our clerks end up, I think, filling that same role as library technicians. And I love our clerks so much. They deal with most of the circulation stuff, whereas librarians tend to deal more with programming and management issues. What else? The clerks do a lot of person-to-person interaction, whereas the librarians tend to be, and it's trending more towards this, be in the back doing planning and doing community outreach, or like leaving the library to do community outreach with community groups. But we are looking at changing our service model so that clerks get a little bit more training and I think a little bit more pay, and in turn deal with the more technological customer service issues. So right now, if a patron comes in and needs to use the computer, a librarian generally will try and help them with that. And that's a little hit and miss because I love my coworkers, but there is not a consistent level of technological know-how amongst librarians. And hopefully that'll change with the information clerks. Hopefully they'll get more training on stuff, but we'll see. But yeah, the long and the short of it is I love our clerks. I love our techs. You guys are the heroes, the unsung heroes. So thanks for doing that work. What else we got going on? Yeah, Canadian library content is good stuff. Very genuine discussion about the work culture. Yeah. Been following you for long enough that it'd be weird to just stop. Yeah. So Althena, other Candace, has been following me. I think you've been around since I was doing Go Verb and Noun. So for those of you who don't know, because I don't talk about it too much on this channel, before I did my master's, or before I started doing my master's, and before I started doing Stacks and Facts, I had, / technically still do have another YouTube channel called Go Verb a Noun. And that was a project I did right after I got out of the Navy in 2014. So when I was in the Navy, I knew I was going to get out starting 2012, 2013, and so I started saving up a bunch of money with the intent of, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And then late 2013, I was like, there's this really cool thing on YouTube, this phenomenon of people just going and making educational, like quality educational content for people and just making it free for everyone. And I want to learn what I can do to help them. So when I finished my time in the Navy in 2014, in February, I stuck around Hawaii because that's where I was stationed, and finished my bachelor's in Chinese at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And then I spent the next 3 or 4 months traveling around North America and Europe, interviewing folks who made educational content and putting it on YouTube. So folks like Hank Green and Lindsay Doe from Sexplanations, Hank Green being from Crash Course and SciShow, Aaron Carroll from Healthcare Triage, all these different folks. And that was actually really fun. And that ended up getting me into the online educational video scene. And I met a lot of really cool people who were doing a lot of really cool things. And the end result of doing Go Verb and Noun was I found that honestly these people were mostly taken care of. The supply side of the equation was taken care of, and that's actually what got me thinking about what my role in all of this would be. And I figured that, well, if the folks who are doing the videos are taken care of, mostly by like YouTube itself, the company YouTube has done a pretty good job at supporting folks who want to make educational content, then maybe I could look at the demand side. And looking at how I could support the demand side then got me looking at different avenues of grad school. At first I thought maybe data science, but then I found out that there was this thing called library and information science that looked at how people and information interact with each other and impact each other and affect each other, for better or worse. And so in 2015, I got a job to build up my savings again and start looking for schools. And then in 2015 I did that, and also applied for grad school. And then in 2016, I started grad school at University of British Columbia, at the School of Information. It's gone through so many names, y'all. Ugh, it's fine. But that was the big thing that got me realizing that, oh, libraries. Interesting. And it's funny, because like I love libraries. I believe in libraries. I think libraries have such great potential, in spite of the fact that like librarianship and libraries systemically have a lot of problems. But I had never really thought about that before starting my master's. At that time I thought that, oh, libraries are cool, I guess. I guess I should probably try and get a master's from a program that's accredited, just in case. Being a librarian will be my fallback. At the time, I thought I was going to do a PhD. Nope, not for me. Yeah, so I am going to open my window. It's getting very hot. Please hold. Alexa, bedroom lights off. So yeah, I started my master's and realized libraries were really cool and started pivoting more towards becoming an academic librarian, or working towards becoming an academic librarian. So I really enjoy the idea of doing research or supporting other people doing research, but I didn't myself want to do a PhD. And part of that is because while I was doing my master's, I sat down with the PhD students and talked to them like, what's your experience like? And our PhD students were so lovely, and also at the same time they were all so tired. Because like there's so much pressure put on you as a PhD student. There's so many things that you have to do, and like I think it's important to have a PhD that's rigorous, but I also like care about my own well-being more than the average person. And so when I saw these folks just being really run down, they really got me questioning, like, is this something I want to do? Perhaps not. Although I say that, and it's been like a year and a half since graduating, and now I'm like, I could go back and do a PhD. Maybe that would be fun. Maybe I should consider that. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go back and get my PhD in information. We'll see. If I do, you heard it here first. Yeah, so that's that. What else? Oh yeah, and all of that comes from the description, comes from doing Go Verb and Noun. So yeah, if you ever want to learn anything, I can help you find a video on it on YouTube. I actually put together a database of educational content, like educational channels. And then like a side thing from that is, like, I've secretly been doing information work since before my master's. To the point where like I am part of a community now of like a formal community called We Create EDU of folks who run channels of all sizes that make educational content. I occasionally talk to folks at YouTube. I do some consulting. I've done some contracting with KQED, which is the public television station down in San Francisco Bay Area. I would go to VidCon every year. And reunite with these folks just to stay on top of what's going on. And yeah, so good stuff. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Yes, Candace, it was super fun. Super fun. I don't know how, but I managed to save up enough money to do that. Granted, like half the time I was camping and then half the time I was staying in a hotel, desperately using horrible Wi-Fi to upload videos. And I learned how to edit videos while doing that. But it was great. Greta Swanson is a high school student who wants to be a librarian. Greta, good on you. Remember, Greta, to be a librarian, you have to have an undergrad degree, which I'm sure you already know. And depending on who you ask, it doesn't matter what you get your undergrad in, but I dare say it does. Find something that interests you. I am always pushing everyone to explore things that they aren't necessarily like already have an in-depth knowledge of for their undergrad. And then that way, when you become a librarian, it makes it easier to become a subject librarian in that particular field. Although I say that, like, I have a bachelor's in Chinese and I have not worked in the Asian library or any Asian library at any university yet. I've applied for a couple jobs, haven't gotten them, but that's different. Yeah. Okay. Toronto Public Library said it very similarly. I'm guessing you're talking about the reliance on auxiliary librarians, question mark? In which case, yeah, I went out to Toronto Public Library back in 2018. Actually, I think it was 2018. Yeah, because I talked to the folks at Merrill, the science fiction and speculative fiction collection. Sephra is awesome. I interviewed them about their library and all that jazz. But we also talked a little bit about labor. And I've kept my ear to the wall about different systems and how they operate. So, yeah. Auxiliary librarianship is a hot wreck, and it needs to be abolished. It's super inhumane, but yeah. Aside, I know I keep touching my hair. I haven't had a haircut since November, and I can't get over the fact that my hair is so soft and long, y'all. Oh, it's great. It's great. Okay, what else do we got? Tyler says, thank you for being a creator on YouTube. It is hard to find library-related YouTube channels. Yes, I agree, although there are a few coming out. I really enjoy learning about librarianship in Canada as I live in the States. Not much difference. Yeah, so from my understanding, and again, I have not been a librarian in the States, but my understanding is that one of the bigger differences between the US and Canada is up in Canada, we have a much, much stronger labor presence. That is to say, here unions are a much bigger deal. And I think that's one of the reasons that I've been somewhat hesitant to go back to the US to be a librarian, because I have heard so many horror stories about like horrible workplaces that are libraries in the States that like, it really sounds hit and miss, and that makes me incredibly nervous. Like, setting aside everything else, I know that there are a lot of really good jobs and really good systems, and I would love to be a part of them, but like, they need to unionize a little bit more, I think, before I would feel super comfortable with that. You also ask, what cool virtual programs have you done or wish you could do? It seems like virtual programs are here to stay, and I need ideas. Well, Tyler, I'm glad you asked. This is actually a really big frustration of mine. So, as you all know, I have a YouTube channel. In my last term of doing my master's, I did a directed study on libraries and how libraries can use YouTube as an outreach and reference tool. And that was a blast. And I actually ended up presenting on that. The end result of that I presented at ALA Midwinter in 2019. I got a panel, and I co-presented with my friend Colleen Tyson, who is a champion and a hero, and you should track her down on Twitter. And like, yeah, like, this is my realm, and so I would love to do more digital and virtual programming in my system. But one of my great frustrations with being an auxiliary is like, even though they hired me and I know that they know that I have this skill set, they haven't used it. Hardly at all. I have done like some data wrangling, but as far as actually doing video content or anything like that, my library hasn't asked me to. And I volunteered multiple times, and that's really frustrating. And I don't, like, I kind of know why that is the case. And I think part of it is to do with the fact that my library is pivoting more towards a community-led model. So the community-led model is where, rather than deciding, oh, we're going to do this programming, just kind of materializing ideas out of whatever thin air or whatever librarians like whim at the day, you know, instead of doing a thing around Second Life. Ugh, what a trope. The librarian who is following a community-led model first consults with the community and identifies community groups that are perhaps underserved or what have you. And after a process of consulting with them and finding out what their needs are and really helping them identify what works for them and what doesn't, then you come up with programming to address those very specific needs that they have. So I think part of the reason that I haven't been asked to do anything like that is because no community entity has asked for that. That said, now that COVID-19 has hit, our community librarians have been hearing that some of the biggest challenges that they've been having is social isolation. And like, again, hello, all of you. I'm talking to all of you. I know how to do this. I've been doing this for a while. And the fact that, like, it's just no one's thought to ask me for help with any of that is just really frustrating and really makes me question if I have a place in this profession. Because, like, as far as I can tell, I have this skill set that is super useful and super relevant, and no one is taking advantage of it. And maybe it's because I am just an auxiliary librarian and my input doesn't count. It doesn't matter. I've actually been thinking about going to my systems chief librarian and, like, sitting down with her and being like, hey, I have these feelings and I don't know what to do with them. And to her credit, I think she would listen, but I don't think that would really accomplish anything. So to answer your question, I want this to be helpful, not just me venting. So the digital program that I've been doing on my own, more or less, is I've been doing book talks. I've been doing author talks and live streams, which maybe you've seen notifications of, maybe you've actually watched or sat in on. I've talked to 5 or 6 authors on Stacks and Facts, and I'm happy to talk to you about my experience getting those set up. It helps that I happen to know, weirdly, a lot of folks who are authors, but also, you know, when I interviewed Kira Jane Buxton, the author of Hollow Kingdom, I literally just emailed her and said, "Hi, Kira Jane. My name's Peter. I am a recently unemployed librarian, and I would love to talk to you about your book. Do you have some time?" And Kira was just like, "Yeah." And it was great. It was great. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. And I don't know why libraries aren't doing this, aside from the fact that, like, there's this perception that, oh, well, we don't have the manpower, we don't have the talent. Again, I'm not bitter. I'm not going to bitter. I'm just going to leave it there. It's fine. So there's that. You could do hangouts like this. I was shocked that, like, we never just set up a camera in the library and did a stream like this and put it out to our patrons. And I guess one of the big issues with that is our library system, and this is an acknowledged problem, doesn't have a huge social media presence. So, like, how do we get that out to people? But any problem that is identified can be overcome. So, I don't know. Lots of people have been running around, like, just trying to stay afloat. So I understand from that angle. But anyways. Yeah, Candace, that and there not being texts, librarians, clerks, and pages. Okay, cool. Isabella is from New Zealand. Hey, welcome. I'm glad you could make it. I wanted to do one in the afternoon because I know usually when I do live streams, it tends to be in the morning because I'm usually my best self in the mornings, but I'm glad you could make it. I have a Patreon supporter. In fact, I'm just going to plug here that if you have any spare cash, feel free to support me on Patreon. I would love the assistance, but if you can't, that's okay too. I know money's tight for everyone. That being said, I have another supporter named Jay on Patreon who lives in New Zealand or Australia. I think New Zealand. And Jay's great. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted to do a stream at 5 p.m. today, because it's like, what, 11 or 12 down there? So, yeah. Hello from New Zealand. It's really interesting to hear what being a librarian is like in other countries and how to become a librarian in other countries. Here, you don't necessarily need a qualification, but there are a couple of places where you can get a diploma, which takes 1 year, or a degree, which takes 3. Yeah, and that's a thing that folks in North America don't necessarily know, is that we're kind of an exception in terms of our educational requirements. So here, and it's a lot to do with the ALA, the American Library Association. And I think one of the reasons that we require a master's degree is it was a way to formalize a profession that wasn't being taken seriously because of things like toxic masculinity and patriarchy and things like that. As almost all of you probably know, the gender balance between men, women, and non-binary folks is heavily skewed towards women. And I did a video on this, and I highly encourage you to go watch it if you haven't, because it's very important, and we need to know why this is. But a response to that is, like, a result of that is the men who were in power wouldn't take folks seriously, and so librarians were like, you know what? We're going to get master's degrees. We're going to become experts in our fields, and then you're going to take us seriously, and then you're going to compensate us fairly. And, like, that kind of worked. But the flip side to that is it also kind of excludes a lot of people from becoming librarians who would otherwise be a great resource to the profession. My opinion, which I don't know if I've mentioned before, I do think that requiring a master's degree is great. And I do recognize that that excludes a lot of people from the profession. But I think that it's important when we look at what's excluding the people from the profession isn't the education, it's the cost of the education. To get a master's degree in the United States and Canada, you have to have thousands upon thousands of dollars. And I think that's bullshit. Pardon my language. I absolutely think that education should be free. And I think that librarianship has done a really bad job at making accommodations to get people who otherwise can't afford the degree, but would be great, into the field. Big shout out to folks like the Black Caucus of the ALA for putting together resources and mentorship and all of that. And shout out to schools out there that have, like, Spectrum. Oh, so Spectrum is another award thing that I think is administered by ALA. Could be wrong. Someone let me know in the chat if I'm wrong, and you know off the top of your head. But we need to make more financial aid available to people of color and Black people, and Indigenous voices and other minorities to get them into librarianship. But we can't just stop there. If we want a more diverse field, we have to do the work to make it so that when they get into the profession, they have a shot. And it all goes back to, it feels like it all goes back to work precarity. Like, as long as we require everyone who goes into the profession to work like a year of part-time work, that's not going to happen. Like, who in their right mind, unless they have access to capital already, would go and spend a year or 2 years and thousands of dollars to get a master's degree to enter a profession where for their first year of education, they're only going to make like $20,000? Maybe. Which, doesn't really help them pay off debt or anything like that. Lots of Black people I've heard from and on Twitter have said, yeah, no, why would I do that? That's a bad investment, and I am already short on cash, as it were, so if I'm going to spend all that money on education, I'm going to do it on something like an MBA. I'm going to make sure that I get my money back. And good. But man, it really sucks that that's the case. So, yeah, pros and cons to how it's done here in North America. Pros and cons. But again, I think that the problem is not the education requirement. I think the problem is the education cost. And we need to deal with the cost of education more than we need to start being like, oh, well, let's just not require masters. Hot take. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but I'm just putting it out there, so deal with it. Yes, my hair is getting majestic. Thank you. JS10 Credible. I was curious if there are any major differences between an online and in-person program. I'm currently looking at different MLS programs that offer archival studies as a concentration. Ooh. Okay. So, this question has a special relevance given that we are in a COVID world. And I don't know how equipped I am to answer that. My experience with online education is I relied on it fairly heavily to do my bachelor's degree. So I did my bachelor's at the same time as I worked a 40 to 50 hour a week job when I was in the Navy. And I think that there is a lot to be said for taking advantage of online programs. Online programs have so much to offer in terms of flexibility, in terms of cost. If you can do an online program and also continue to work, it increases like your capacity financially. And those are all really important things. The flip side is I specifically wanted to do a program in person because my expectation, which ended up being a reality, is that a program that's done in person offers so many more opportunities than in terms of putting your skills to good use than something online does, unless you're already working in a library or working in an institution where you're doing information work. Because I did my program in person, I was able to be employed almost full-time the entire time through, which was a great way to see how the theory that we were learning got put into practice. And with like library specific work, less so, although because I was doing my work in person, I was also able to do research with my university's library and my advisor, Erin Fields. Shout out to Erin, she is the best. And that's not something that I would have been able to do if I'd, say, done San Jose State. And again, I want to be super clear. This is not a dig against San Jose State's quality as an educational institution. I don't know. I didn't go. I would have liked to. I've mentioned this before, that I absolutely would have done if they would have let me do at least one class in person, because my education was paid for by the US government, and to get the full amount of support, I needed to have at least one class in person. But they weren't willing to negotiate on that, so I could not. But just, yeah, having that component is super useful. Being able to have face-to-face conversations with your peers, like, is so valuable. And maybe a lot of you have felt this with everything shutting down and having such a reliance on things like Zoom and FaceTime and Skype. As much as we hope that the digitally mediated conversations that we have can be a proxy for in-person connection, it's not. Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And with online courses, I think that is something that it becomes more apparent. So, you got to pick your battles with it. But again, if you are already in a situation where you are at a workplace and you have a stable job, or you have kids or whatever, and you can't afford to commit 20 to 30 hours a week on campus, doing just straight up school stuff, then probably an online option is a really good choice for you. Or like if you're remote, or if you can't afford to relocate. Like, yeah, I straight up moved to another country to do this, but I also had the financial support. So like recognizing I'm coming from that place of privilege. Most people don't necessarily have that. So whatever works for you. Underappreciated and underutilized. Hope that changes. Thanks. Me too. We'll see. Tyler, do I have a professional email address that I could message you about virtual programming? I would love your input and ideas. I have just a regular email address that you can message me at, pmusser@gmail.com. First initial, last name @gmail.com. Also, I think if you go to... Here, I'm going to do a screen share real quick to show you the easiest way to find me. Let's just go to... See if I can figure this out. Please bear with me. So my website, by the way, is petermusser.com, which makes it super easy to find. Let me do this. We're going to do this window capture. Create new. There we go. All right. So this is my website. If you want to get a hold of me, what you can do is you just go over to contact. And this is where I am everywhere. I do have 2 Twitter accounts, and you may know this. This is the one that I talk about in videos, the Stacks at Facts. I don't check that super often, but that's because like I don't get approached that often. But I'm on this one altogether far too much, so you can find me there. My Tumblr, I don't use a whole lot, but every now and then I go back and check it out and reblog things that I think are cool. My Facebook, but real talk, if you find me on Facebook or if you find me on LinkedIn and you send me a friend request, I'm not going to respond because I don't know you. It's not a dig against you. It's just a personal preference. But yeah, email pmusser@gmail.com. Or if you want to find me in person, if you ever visit Vancouver, let me know. I'm happy to get coffee with you and talk about whatever the heck you want after your 14 days of quarantine are over. So yeah, there's that. Oh, there we go. But yeah, shoot me a line and we can talk. I'm happy to. I'm even happy to Skype with you or what have you. What else do we got going on? Are there people that disagree that actually had to pay those tens of thousands of dollars for the education? Yes. In fact, there are lots of people who went and got an MLIS and spent the tens and thousands of dollars to get it, who are really vocal about feeling like it was a waste of their time and money. And there are a few different reasons for that. The biggest is that what you learn in library school doesn't necessarily translate to what you do as a librarian. As a librarian, and I get what they're saying, but again, I think the problem is the cost, not the content of the education. My understanding is that when you do your master's, the point is not that you're doing just this professional degree so that you can do a job. The point is that you learn about how people and information interact. And like doing your master's is your one chance in your entire information career to make mistakes and not have it hurt anyone. Not that like librarianship is a super high stress, high likelihood of hurting people environment, but like when done wrong, yeah, it can be. And so, but yeah, people then go and they learn about all of this theory and they think, oh, this is really cool, I guess, whatever. And then they go and they become librarians and like, I'm using like 3% of what I learned in library school, when really most of it is learning how to keep people from yelling at each other and use computers and blah, 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 blah. A big response that I have to this is that it's not the master's degree's fault that you're not using it. There are a lot of things that you could do with your master's degree if your institution had better funding. If society at large took libraries more seriously and funded them appropriately. If management, and this is not a dig against the management of my system, you guys are doing actually really good. I will give them the credit that they deserve insofar as my system is doing their best to reform some really old set practices that don't necessarily have a basis in research or reality. But a lot of library systems have management that doesn't see the point of doing new things or trying new things, and they don't want to support the folks who are doing new things or trying new things. And so if you just spent 1.5 years or 2 years or 2.5 years doing your master's and you find yourself in a library system where you don't get to use any of that, yeah, it's going to feel like a waste of money. But like, again, I get the frustration, but I think that it's also important to keep in mind that like, just because you aren't using those skills doesn't mean that you don't have them. In my very first video, in my What is Library and Information Science video, like I included a list of many different job titles that you can get when you have a Master's of Library and Information Science, because like the degree itself is super cool and super relevant. I just think that it's also important for folks to understand, and I think I might do a video about this later, that sometimes libraries aren't the place for you. But then I guess the other side of that is that a lot of the folks who don't appreciate, or who have buyer's remorse, as it were, for getting a master's degree in library and information science are folks who worked in libraries and then went and got degrees. And in the process of getting degrees, they were like, well, what I'm learning about doesn't really correlate to my own experiences. So like, what am I doing this for? Why am I just checking a box? And I empathize. I would feel super jilted if I got as high as I could in a career only to find out that the only way I could progress in that career is to go spend $30,000 on a credential. And then when I go and take that credential, see that, none of this really applies to me. So I have a lot of empathy for people, and I don't necessarily agree. I think, again, it goes back to like, if libraries were taken more seriously, and like legit, if librarians took their jobs more seriously, then their degrees would be a lot more useful. And again, I guess it depends on how people see their role. I'm very clear in my mind on seeing librarianship's role as putting people and information into meaningful contact with each other, meaningful and accessible contact with each other. And not all libraries emphasize that as wholly as they could. So, Isabella says, here, if you want to study librarianship, you have to study by distance. I don't get to meet anyone on my course, which I find really disappointing. Yeah, I could see that. On the bright side, perhaps the whole switch in COVID to continuing that is less of a culture shock for you. So, bright side to everything. Tyler says, I found my online MSLS program very valuable. Most of my colleagues already held a library job. Note that funding tends to be sparser. Most of my classes were library focused, not as much information. Yeah, okay. And then Althena did her master's in publishing, which was entirely online. And much of the experience wasn't impacted, but there were a couple of courses where having in-person discussion or lessons would have been helpful to speak to online education from just a single student learning angle. Yeah, so again, I think online has its place and I think it has its uses. Just for me, doing it in person was a preference, and it ended up working out really well. So yeah, that's where we're at. And I've got caught up with the chat. But Mary has a question. Or a comment. Your channel is very helpful. I'm from the US and want to study at UBC too. What was your experience like, and can you give any application tips? Mary, yes, UBC is great. That is not a consensus view. I know that there are some students who didn't have as good of a time, and a reason for that is some of the things I've already mentioned. So like, if you've already worked in a library before, and you don't approach a master's degree as like, I'm getting an advanced research degree, I'm learning about a thing in a really, really fine level of detail, you might not like it, but that's going to be the same for any program. But UBC as a school, I found, was really supportive. When I was looking for programs to attend, like schools to attend, I reached out to UBC, University of Washington, Syracuse, I think one more, San Jose State, and UBC was hands down the most responsive. Like, just for example, like on a Monday, I emailed and said, hey, my name's Peter, I live in the States, and I was considering applying for the MLIS program, and I saw on your website that you have a research interest, or you have a researcher who's interested in this thing. I was wondering if there's someone I could talk to about that. That was Monday. On Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday, I was Skyping with the professor who was in charge of that. And we had an hour-long conversation, and it was amazing. And at that point, it was cemented in my brain that like, I'm only going to apply to UBC. And if they don't accept me, then librarianship or the MLIS is not for me, and I will reassess my life. But I applied and I got accepted. Now, as for your question about any tips on applying and getting accepted, I would say, like, and this is a question I get fairly often, be sincere. Don't try and make yourself sound like the candidate that they want. Make yourself sound like the candidate that wants to be there. My personal philosophy is, if you're going to do anything, do it wholeheartedly. Half measures, like a life of just a bunch of half measures, just isn't really great. And so if you want to become a librarian, make sure that that's what you want to do. And make sure that that comes across in your writing. That doesn't mean be overly enthusiastic in your writing. That doesn't mean being super flowery and using like too many conjunctions or adjectives like superlatives and stuff like that. But like, explain your reasoning. If you want to go to UBC, for me, like it was, I want to go to UBC because I want to understand how we can use online video to help people get access to education in meaningful and accessible ways. Here's why. And then I gave my backstory. Do that. Give your backstory. Try and tell a coherent narrative of what's gotten you to the point that you're applying for a master's degree, an advanced, a graduate level education. And, you know, that doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily get guaranteed admission, but at least that gives the folks who are assessing a fair shot at knowing whether or not you're a good fit. Another piece of advice is have someone look over your writing. Not me. I will not review your essays, but I'm happy to give more advice in emails. What else? If you can, really take some time to get to know what the school's specialties are. So if you go, we can just go back here since we're talking about UBC. Window capture. So UBC's school website is slace.ubc.ca. You can learn about what the school cares about, and this is the same for any school, but we're looking at UBC right now because this is what I know. This is like the same thing at every single school. Things are in different places, but otherwise it's the same layout. Let me just do this real quick. Actually, no, we'll just go back here. So, to see what a school cares about, usually there's a tab called Research or Research Focuses, and you can see like projects. That's one good place to see like what the school is actually looking at. So UBC cares about designing for people. They do a lot of human information interaction and human computer interaction. We have, or UBC broadly has, a blockchain research cluster. So that's folks from different parts of the university, not just the School of Information, looking at how blockchain works and some of its applications. I can tell you at UBC, it is around record keeping and verification. But that's archival stuff a little bit more than information stuff, and so I don't have huge expertise there. But when we scroll down, you can see things like iSchool faculty research, and this is talking about what the actual faculty members are researching. The other place you can find that is if you go up to people, you can check out faculty and staff. And students and postdoc researchers. So students isn't going to list like all of the master's students. It's going to list the PhD students for reasons. But if we go to faculty, here's all the people. Oh, I love these people. Here's all the people that you will meet and that will teach you things. Let's say that I feel like this used to be more filled out. And it used to say a little snippet of what they were interested in. But we'll just pick Richard real quick. Richard Arias Hernandez. If you go here, it gives you a little blurb about like what he cares about and what his interests are. So Richard also happens to be an instructor for the Bachelor of Media Studies. And he also has, I want to say, a doctorate. Yeah. Science and Technology Studies from Rensselaer. And a master's in Information Management Systems. He did most of the tech courses at the university. The other person who did the other ones. So like the nitty gritty, like database design. And then Rick Kopak did the more information design courses. So like how to design information to be useful. But you can go and see, and I would encourage you to click through all of these people to see, you know, who might line up with your interests the most. And then when you contact the school, you should contact the school before you apply. Ask them, like, can I talk to this person, or can I talk to somebody with an interest in this thing? And I think that will show that, like, you're actually taking this application seriously. You've done your homework. People will keep that in mind, I bet. So, yeah. Isabella says, you're right. I felt extremely lucky when everyone had to learn by distance too. I almost started studying adventure tourism instead of librarianship, which would have been hugely disrupted. Yeah. So, yeah, that's where we're at. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm trying to think. So one thing I did say I would talk about in this video is the future of libraries and COVID. And that's another thing that kind of has me, I don't want to say second guessing whether or not libraries are for me, but like a part of me I know is really going to mourn the loss of like social connection as a librarian. And that's something that I've always been worried about since becoming a librarian, is in my system at least, there's a lot of push to send the librarians from the front of the house, so where they interact with patrons, to the back of the house so that they can do more programming planning and more programming development. And that stuff is very important. But like, as someone who's super social and who I think is fairly good at reading people, I really worry about the loss of regular interaction with our patrons who actually come to the library. And I've talked to some of my colleagues about that, and like one of their responses is like, well, yes, but like it's important to remember that under the community-led model, we aren't just concerned with the people who come through the doors. Like, from a marketing point of view, these people, we can count on them. They're already coming in. Under the community-led model, we need to find the people who are failing. And so while you might really enjoy spending time with the people in the library, while you're there, while you're working at the reference desk or the info desk, it's important to invest some effort in figuring out how to reach the people who aren't coming in, because these are the people who need us perhaps the most. And I think that that's a valid point. Selfishly, I also think it's just really important to like have a librarian on desk at times and interact with patrons, and like as a way to remind them, like, we are a service profession. We exist to serve our patrons and make their lives a little bit better. And the less that we interact with them, I think the more likely it is that we'll lose touch of the fact that they are people in the first place. My most gratifying interactions with patrons are when someone comes in just off the street and has a question, and I get to be the person who encounters them and listens to them and like gets really excited with them about that thing that they're coming in to find information about. Like, I love working with kids. I love being a children's librarian when I can, and I love working with newcomers or the immigrant communities, because like rarely, there are few opportunities in life where you get to talk to someone and really make sure that they feel like this space, this library space, my house, is a place that they're welcome whenever they need. And that's not to say that clerks, who are going to end up being more of the front-facing people, can't do that. But like very selfishly, I want that to be me. And I think that there's a lot of value and power in making sure that somebody who has a master's degree and who has experience like teasing apart information and research and putting it back together in a way that someone or anyone can use, making sure that the community has access to that person for free is vitally important. So when we talk about like librarians going to the back of the house more than the front of the house, just a thing I get nervous about. And I think that that's going to be a little bit more of the case now that we are in a COVID world. Plexiglass barriers are going up. People are wearing masks, which gives other people less visual information to pick up on when you're interacting with someone. I'm going to be like, it's going to be really hard to help someone on a computer at 6 feet away. And there are technical ways to overcome that. But like, I really think that that element of personal care, of intimacy almost, is super important. And for whatever reasons, other people don't think that that's as important. And I'm an auxiliary, so what do I know? Yeah, so there's that. I think everything is going to be fine, though. It's, I think, important to keep in mind that things will change, and most things are neither good nor bad. They simply are. And so as librarianship changes, hopefully we'll get some good out of this. I know we will. I know the profession is going to come out of this with new ways to protect our patrons and serve our patrons, and I think that that's important. So I look forward to it. If anyone else has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Otherwise, I think we're just about good for wrapping. We're at 1 hour and 10. Well played, everybody. It's almost dinner time. But thank you, everyone, for being here, and thanks for spending some time with me. If you ever have any questions, you can always leave a comment or track me down on the internet. I am on Twitter at @the_musser. Or stacks at facts. You can always reach me there. You can email me. But until next time, thank you for watching, and don't forget to ask questions. Okay, take care, everybody, and I'll see you next time.